Alright, solving radical equations lesson 2. So our first example is the square root of x plus 39 equals the square root of x plus 3. So this one has two square roots in it, so there's no way to get the square root by itself because there's two different ones. So you just have to go ahead and square both sides. But again, you have to be really careful when you do this. This side, nice and easy. The square root and the square cancel, and you're left with x plus 39. On the other side, when you square root of x plus 3, you have to write it twice and FOIL. Alright, so let's watch and see what's going on here. The square root of x times the square root of x is just x, because you have the square root of x times the square root of x, which is the square root of x squared. So those cancel, so you're left with just x. Then the square root of x plus 3 gives you 3 square root x, and then 3 square root x plus 9. Okay, so I'm going to drop this down. X plus 39 equals, I have x plus 6 root x. Remember, when you add these, you combine like terms, and that just stays the same, plus 9. Your x's cancel, because if you move this one over here, you would subtract it, or if you move this one over here, you would subtract it, so those cancel out. So I'm left with 39 equals 6 root x plus 9. Subtract 9, which gives you 30, and divide by 6. So you're trying to get the square root by itself now. Divide by 6. And then lastly, to get rid of the square root, you're going to square both sides again, but this time it's going to work out really nice. 25 equals x. Alright, you still have to go back and plug your answer in, because there's always the possibility of extraneous solutions. So when I plug it back in, square root 25 plus 39 equals the square root of 25 plus 3. Alright, 25 plus 39, 50, 64. And then I get 5 plus 3. Square root of 64 is 8. 5 plus 3 is 8, so that works. So x is equal to 25. Alright, number 2. Square root of x minus 9, all of that under the square root, minus square root of x equals negative 1. Okay, so you have two square roots, so you can't get them by yourself, so you want to square both sides. But before you do that, it will be easier if you get one square root on the left and one square root on the right. So anytime you have two square roots, you want one on the left side of the equals and one on the right. So I'm going to move this one over, so negative square root of x becomes positive square root of x, and then drop down the minus 1. Alright, so now I'm left with this. So now I'm going to square both sides. The square root and the square cancel, so I'm left with x minus 9 equals. Here I need to write it twice, and I'm going to do the lobster claw. Square root of x times square root of x is just x. Square root of x times negative 1 is negative 1 square root x, negative 1 square root x, and then negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Alright, once again your x's cancel, because if you move it to one side you would subtract, and so they'd cancel out. So I'm left with negative 9 equals, I'm going to combine like terms, negative 2 square root x plus 1. And now I'm going to get this square root x by itself. So I'm going to subtract 1, which gives me negative 10. Divide by negative 2. Remember, you can pause this video to catch up. And then square both sides. So you get 25 equals x again. Alright, let's check that one. So go back and plug it back in. So that would be the square root of 25 minus 9 minus the square root of 25 equals negative 1. Alright, 25 minus 9 is 16, so the square root of 16 minus 5 equals negative 1. Square root of 16 is 4. 4 minus 5 is negative 1. So 25 does work. All right, 2 more. Number 3, square root of 3x plus 1 equals the square root of 5x minus 1. Alright, so we have one square root on the left, one square root on the right. So we're ready to square both sides. Square root and the square cancel, so 3x plus 1 equals, you need to write this one twice. Alright, the square root of 5x times the square root of 5x is just 5x, because once again, that means the square root of 5x times the square root of 5x is the square root of 5x squared, so those cancel. So you're left with 5x. Then times negative 1 gives you negative 1 square root 5x. Here gives you negative 1 square root 5x, and then negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Alright, so I get 3x plus 1, I'm just dropping that down, equals 5x. Combine like terms, that gives you negative 2 square root 5x plus 1. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and move the 5x over. So I'm going to subtract 5x, which gives me negative 2x. And I'm going to move this one over here, so I'm going to subtract 1, so those cancel. So I'm left with negative 2x. The 5x I moved, so it's gone. So 3x minus 5x is negative 2x. And here I'm left with negative 2 square root 5x. Alright, so I'm trying to get the square root by itself, so I'm going to divide by negative 2. Those cancel, so I'm left with x equals square root of 5x. Now you're ready to square both sides again. So I get x squared equals square root and square cancel 5x. And then the way you solve this one is by factoring. So you move everything to one side. So x squared minus 5x equals 0. And this one is not a trinomial. So you just pull out the greatest common factor. They both have an x. You pull out an x. You're left with x minus 5. And then you're going to set both of these equal to 0. So x equals 0. X minus 5 equals 0. So x equals 5. Alright, we have to check both those answers. I'm going to check x equals 0 first. So when I go back to plug it back into the original, square root of 3 times 0 plus 1 equals the square root of 5 times 0 minus 1. Alright, 3 times 0 is 0 plus 1, that'd be square root of 1. This is square root of 0. Square root of 1 is 1. This gives you negative 1. So that does not work. So x equals 0 is not a solution. Let's try 5. Square root of 3 times 5 plus 1 equals the square root of 5 times 5 minus 1. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16, so you got the square root of 16. Here you have the square root of 25 minus 1. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 25 is 5. 5 minus 1 is 4. So your only answer is x equals 5. Alright, last one, number 4. Square root of x minus 6 minus the square root of x equals 3. Remember, if there's more than one square root, you want to move one to the other side of the equals. You want one on the left side of the equals and one on the right side of the equals. So square root of x minus 6 equals the square root of x plus 3. When you move it to the other side, it becomes positive. Alright, let's go ahead and square both sides. Square root and the square cancel. This one you have to write it twice and lobster claw. Square root of x times square root of x is x. Square root of x times 3 is 3 square root x. Then you do the bottom claw. 3 square root x plus 9. Alright, your x's cancel because if you move this over here you would subtract it. So those, your x's cancel out. So I have negative 6 equals, going to combine like terms, 6 square root x plus 9. And then I'm going to subtract 9. and then divide by 6. Alright, so this reduces to a fraction. Negative 5 halves equals the square root of x. And then I'm going to square both sides. So I get 25 over 4 equals x. Alright, let's plug that back in and see if it works. So the square root, 25 over 4 minus 6, minus the square root of 25 over 4 equals 3. Alright, so I'm going to type this side in my calculator since I have fractions. Square root of 25 over 4, sorry, I should have used parentheses, minus 6, and then I'm going to hit my over arrow to stop the square root, minus another square root, 25 over 4, and it equals negative 2. It does not equal 3. So this one has no solution, and Delta Math wants there to be empty brackets for that.